Hi guys, welcome back to Lancom TV. I'm sitting here with Scott. Hi Scott, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
Scott is the head of cybersecurity products for auto security, and he's here today to talk to us about cybersecurity. Very classic. So Scott, thanks for coming and joining us today. There's so much we can talk about cybersecurity, and I'm sure you have a wealth of information you could be providing to our audience today. But what I was wondering and what I wanted to chat to you about is just this whole idea and this notion of cybersecurity becoming part of boardrooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a few years back, if I remember correctly, we never had that discussion at any given day. We would talk about security maybe once or twice a year, and that's probably about it. And then this whole new wave of attacks and ransomware and all sorts of issues came up. And now every time you walk into a meeting with a CFO or a CEO or a business owner, you kind of have to touch on the topic. So it almost became a thing that cybersecurity has to be a part of a business strategy, isn't it? And
Right.
so my thinking or my questions for you today as a cybersecurity specialist is, what does that mean for businesses? Because there's so much we can talk about. And do you have a top 3 or top 4 giveaways or a checklist or a to-do list that you usually recommend people to start when they're talking about cybersecurity?
Yeah, so you've hit on a really important point that it's a massive topic, and it's really hard for everyone to get their heads around this kind of topic, especially boards and business people. So it's always been a problem. That's what's really important to know. It's always been there, but it is getting worse. And there's a lot of reasons to say why it is getting worse.
Right.
But the reality is that the more we're on the internet, both as individuals and as businesses, means there's more targets for people out there. And the technology of which these attackers use is more automated and readily available. So you kind of have this, more targets. It's easy to do. It comes, it becomes a bigger thing for the whole wider world. So not just New Zealand, but also for
that's true.
New Zealand especially is not as mature. So we as a cybersecurity provider of both consultancy services and products have found there's a bit of a challenge of raising maturity in the market. And that's the biggest thing, to make people aware. Awareness is probably the hardest thing to really help businesses get that level of understanding that this is a problem that does affect them. Just because we're isolated doesn't mean that we're
we don't
immune.
have a problem. Exactly. So you touched on a very important point, education, right? And that's hopefully the goal of today, to try and bring a little bit more of education to our audience today watching us. So how do we go on about doing something when it comes down to cybersecurity? What the business should be looking for? I'm sure there's a million of solutions out there, but is there a recommended path that you usually talk through when you engage with people?
There definitely is, and we've had thought long and hard about this. And so we tend to need to talk at a high level to business as well. This is not just the IT manager, it's not just just the CTO. This starts at, as you indicated at the start of this session, at the board level, CEO level. It needs that awareness. And look, that's where the education has to start. But once you've gotten that awareness and showing them this is a risk that can be managed, we've put together a list of things which people can start off. We kind of call them the Aura critical security controls.
Fantastic.
There are 10 of them, and we don't have to talk about all 10 of them today. But those things are sort of ideal start points for any given business, regardless of size, to start thinking about.
Okay. And so if we just maybe talk about the top 3 of those sort of top 10, and we can always give away the further information on what those are to those watching us today. So what would be the number 1 recommendation that you give away then, Scott?
Well, first of all, and this is a freebie, it's you need to keep your systems and operating systems patched and up to date.
Yes.
So it's key. Attackers are, by inherent, automated and a little bit lazy. So they'll compromise things that are known. They won't try and be unique. So it's important you patch your systems first. That's one of the key things that you can do. And most businesses can do it themselves. They don't have to pay another product for this. This is just get your patch program in place and regularly done. And that's where we can help with people doing that as a plan, but you can do that yourself or have a partner to help you get your patch plan in place.
All right, absolutely. So patching is the number one. So if we move on to number two, I've done all my patching.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
So now it comes down to what you're going to do in your network. We call this least privilege access, and making sure that the only people in your business that need to have access to something do have that.
Right, so it's just narrowing down that permissions list essentially. So if you don't have to access HR information, why should you? Or management information, why should you?
Yeah.
And why is that important to organizations, Scott?
Well, we like to operate on the best case that you will get hacked.
Yes.
It will be a compromise. It may be you've actually been targeted. It may be just by an automated scattergun approach, like we saw with some of the WannaCry and NotPetya attacks, where it was just people got compromised through just automated attacks. So these things will happen, and if you do get an end user compromised, then the amount of damage that person can do if that end user's credentials are stolen is limited to what they can access.
Yeah, excellent. So it's not even just about how much you want to protect information from your staff. It's more thinking about the worst case scenario. And what if Bob was compromised? What could that hacker or that person see if they got access to their account? Fantastic. I like that.
Yeah.
Because in the past, I guess there was a lot of thinking around who should access what from a management perspective and from a HR perspective. But now we're going one step further in thinking about worst case scenarios and really thinking about I'm just one step from being hacked. What should I put in place to avoid that?
Yeah.
All right. And so we left with point 3. And what is that?
Well, point 3 does get into technology, so this isn't just the first two are really about you can do things inside your own systems to manage these things, with a bit of planning. The other part is sometimes requires a bit of investment, but this is really important. So we like to think of this called multi-factor authentication.
Oh yeah, I've got one of those now.
Yeah, so we tend to have this on, this is where if you want to log in to your bank account and it's the first time you've done it from a particular device, often they'll send a text message to your phone because it's registered.
Yes. It's been around for a while, isn't it?
So it's usually just having two items that require, you can't just use a username and password to log into a system, especially if it's the first time. It requires another form of proof of identity, which tends to be sometimes text message, phone systems. So that's something which is really key to because we assume your username and password will get compromised. But if they don't have your mobile or the other unique piece of identification information, they can't log in as you.
Yeah, so you're still having that extra gate to avoid people getting through your
That's
account.
right. And the idea in this game is you don't have to be 100% foolproof, but it's being harder than another guy to be compromised. Then the attackers are by nature slightly lazy and automated. They'll go for the softer target. So you need to be the harder target.
Right. And there are a million of options when it comes down to multi-factor authentication. There are a number of solutions that business should be looking to put in place today. Some of them don't really cost a lot of money, so it is an easy one to talk about with your IT provider or your internal IT department and sort of get that in place before it is too late, isn't it?
And you don't have to do it across all systems. You can start small. You can
maybe start with emails.
You can start with your admin controls for the key systems. If you've done point 2, we've controlled your admin logins. You can start there. And then you can move down the chain to everyone. Because sometimes applying that to an entire customer base or user base or your internal staff is really hard.
Yes.
But you start with the critical things and you move down. That's planning.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, 3 points. I love them. And the great news is all of them are things that people can go and action today. So thank you so much for the insights, Scott. I really appreciate your time. And as we said at the beginning, there are probably 7 or a few others that Aura Security would recommend businesses to be looking at as a starting point. So we'll be giving those away to anyone watching us today. There will be a link that will follow through to download. So thanks so much. I really appreciated chatting to you and hope to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
See ya, guys.
Cheers.
Bye for now.